Hello, and welcome to LURK, the Insomnia Files. If you're awake right now, staring into the dark while the rest of the world sleeps, you're in the right place. Many people listen to these stories to relax. Others listen because sleep refuses to come. Before we begin, leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from tonight. A bedroom, a car, a quiet house that doesn't feel as empty as it should. If these stories speak to you, make sure you like the video and subscribe. To LURK, the Insomnia Files. Now get comfortable, lower the lights, take a slow breath, and let's open tonight's file. I'm writing this from my phone while I still have a signal, because something is very wrong, and I don't think I'll have much time left to explain it properly. 4 months ago, I moved into the Optima building in Scottsdale through the Origin pilot program. I would never have been able to afford this place otherwise. The rent discount was massive, $1,200 off per month. That number mattered more than any warning sign, and I didn't ask enough questions when I signed the lease. Origin sold it as the future of living. Dynamic spatial allocation, smart architecture, adaptive interiors. The walls weren't fixed. They were mounted on haptic rails and shifted automatically based on what the system decided I needed at any given moment. During the day, the bedroom would shrink, and the office would expand. At night, that everything slid back into place. It was supposed to be seamless, invisible, efficient. At first, it actually was impressive. The movements were slow and quiet, like the building was breathing. I'd wake up and feel the room stretch slightly while I made coffee. I'd come home, and the space would already be rearranged for sleep. The app tracked everything: sleep cycles, productivity hours, movement patterns. It said the apartment learned me. I joked about it learning too much, but I liked the idea of a space that adapted instead of fighting me. The Origin rep told me the system was still in pilot mode, but that it was safe. Tested, approved. I believed them because the discount made me want to believe them. The first problem showed up 3 days ago. I didn't notice it right away. I left a coffee mug on the kitchen island and walked into the office area. I heard the low mechanical hum that meant the walls were shifting. When I came back, the mug wasn't on the island anymore. It was floating, just barely. It hovered in the air for maybe 2 seconds before gravity seemed to remember it existed, and it dropped, shattering on the tile. I stared at the broken pieces for a long time, waiting for my brain to catch up. I assumed the island had moved faster than usual, or that I was tired, or that the system had miscalculated the object's position during the shift. I filed a support ticket through the app, reference number 88802-S. The response came back fast, polite, and completely useless. The Origin rep told me to recalibrate the haptic floor sensors and restart the apartment layout protocol. Yeah, I followed the steps exactly. Nothing changed. Last night is when the real failures began. I walked into the kitchen around midnight to get water, and the floor felt wrong under my feet. Not slippery, not soft. It felt unfinished, like wet concrete that hadn't cured yet. When I stepped forward, my footprints stayed behind. Perfect impressions of my feet pressed deep into the tile, as if the material had lost its density. I stood there, heart pounding, staring at the marks. I lifted one foot and pressed it down again. The floor accepted it, held it, let go slowly when I stepped back. I went to the bathroom, breathing too fast, trying to calm down. That's when I noticed the toothbrush holder was gone. The holder had always been mounted to the wall, right next to the sink. It wasn't broken. It wasn't fallen. It was gone. I followed the toothbrush with my eyes before I even fully understood what I was seeing. It was embedded in the drywall, 3 inches deep. The handle disappeared into the wall completely. Only the bristles were visible, splayed outward, stiff with dried toothpaste. I grabbed it and pulled. The wall moved, not the rails, not the panel seams. The drywall itself pulled away from my hand, like muscle, tightening before a punch. It recoiled. I let go and stumbled back, my heart slamming so hard I felt it in my throat. That's when I noticed the hum. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even something I could point to. It was a vibration, a low frequency that buzzed through my teeth and jaw, like standing too close to heavy machinery. It made my head ache, and my thoughts feel slow. It made sleeping impossible. I opened the Origen app to find a manual override. The interface was gone. No menus, no icons, no settings. Just a black screen with a single green progress bar slowly filling from left to right. Volume optimization, 98%. I stared at that screen for a long time, trying to understand what volume meant. Square footage, air, data, me. I went to the front door. The door isn't a door anymore. It looks like one. I can see the wood grain, the deadbolt, the handle, but there's no depth, no gap, no shadow where the door should separate from the frame. It's a flat image, like a high-resolution photograph pasted onto a solid slab. I tried the emergency key anyway. There's no keyhole, just a texture shaped like one. My fingers slide over it like touching a printed picture. I ran to the window. Scottsdale is gone. No street, no lights, no buildings, no sky. Just a blurred gray haze, high contrast, like static frozen into fog. It presses against the glass without touching it. There's no sense of distance, no horizon. There is a white sedan sitting in that haze. It's tilted on its back right tire, like it was abandoned mid-turn. I know that car. I don't know how I know, but I do. I've seen it before, somewhere I shouldn't have. The apartment is shrinking, not smoothly like before, not on rails. The bedroom is now a narrow corridor, barely 4 feet wide. The walls are bending inward at angles that don't make sense. My closet is pushing into the room diagonally, cutting off access to the bed entirely. The floor slopes slightly, like gravity is being rewritten in small, careless increments. My shadow is wrong. It lags behind me. I'll raise my hand, and the shadow waits, while 1 full second passes before it moves. When it does, it doesn't line up correctly. It stretches too far, or bends at the wrong angle like it's guessing. There's a layer of fine gray dust covering everything. It's on the floor, on my laptop, on my skin. It isn't loose, it doesn't wipe away. It's bonded. When I try to scrape it off a surface, the sensation runs up my fingers like pain through nerves. Like I'm scraping my own fingernails across concrete. The app pinged again. Occupant status, backlog, repatriation pending, Site 04. I don't know what that means, but the word backlog makes my stomach twist. Like I'm not late. Like I'm waiting in line. I can't hear the neighbors. I can't hear the air conditioning. The building is silent except for the hum and the faint clicking sound inside my head. I'd like a mechanical shutter closing and opening behind my eyes every time I blink. The air smells wrong. Burnt plastic. Old coffee left too long on a hot plate. Acidic and stale. Every breath feels thinner than the last. I'm standing by the door image now. The handle is just a gray smudge. I can hear someone yelling. A man. He's talking about a car, about someone named Gary. But the sound isn't coming from the hallway. It's coming from under the floorboards, like the building is replaying something it recorded a long time ago. The app just finished. The progress bar hit 100%, finalizing archive. I can't breathe properly. There isn't enough air left in the room. The walls feel closer every second. like they're compressing not just space, but possibility. Like the apartment isn't a place anymore. It feels like a file that's already been closed. "12 missed calls. I didn't look at the phone. I didn't need to. I already knew who it was, and I already knew what she wanted. The phone kept vibrating against the old oak bar counter, the sound dull and angry, like it was trying to crawl its way into my skull. My fingers stayed wrapped around the wet glass in front of me. 6th pour, maybe 7th. I'd stopped counting because counting meant admitting something. 13. I stared into the amber liquid and felt nothing. No warmth, no comfort, no guilt, just exhaustion. I was tired of the noise, tired of the fights that never went anywhere, tired of dragging around this twisted, broken thing my wife and I still called love, out of habit. Even here, surrounded by spilled drinks and cigarette smoke, I could still smell her. Lavender. It clung to me, sharp and clean. It completely out of place in this bar. It made my jaw tighten. 14. Her screaming replayed in my head, looping over and over. There was no love in it, no care, just raw anger thrown back and forth until it stopped meaning anything. I took another drink. The burn was gone now. My body barely reacted anymore. That scared me more than the argument had. If I'd stayed in that house any longer, something ugly would have happened. I knew that. I had never hit her, and I clung to that fact like it was proof I was still a good man. A low bar, she used to say, and maybe she was right. I rolled the glass slowly between my palms. Every so often in the reflection, I saw him, that crooked grin, my father's face staring back at me through the whiskey. I was a kid when it happened, too small to stop anything. And all I could do was watch him swing his fists, blood flying. My mother curled on the floor. I still remembered the sound she made when she cried, thin and broken. I remembered the way he looked down at me, eyes black and empty, smiling like it was all a joke. Even when the police dragged him away, that smile never left. I knew that rage lived inside me too, passed down like a curse. If I stayed in that house, one day it would surface and I'd become him. I couldn't let that happen. I needed to get away. I needed to drown it before it drowned me. The phone vibrated again. 15. I had kept my voicemail full on purpose. I didn't want her words trapped somewhere I could replay them. I didn't want to hear her tell me I wasn't a man, that I always ran, that I never kept my promises. But I slammed the empty glass on the counter and ignored the bartender's glare. I paid, grabbed my coat, and stumbled out into the winter night. The cold slapped me hard, sharp enough to almost feel good. As I staggered toward my truck, I scrolled through the texts. Each one begged, accused, apologized, then accused again. My chest felt tight as I read the last message. No anger, no apology, just 4 words. It's not a tree. I stopped walking. I didn't know why it unsettled me so much at the time. It didn't sound threatening. It didn't sound loving. It just sat there, heavy and wrong. I shouldn't have been on that road. Snow and ice coated everything, and the whiskey finally caught up with me. My hands were slick on the steering wheel, sweat burning my eyes. I lost track of how many times I swerved to avoid the drifts. I lifted my phone and tried calling her. No answer. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat and focused on the road. 2 glowing eyes appeared in the dark. Antlers stretched up toward the sky. I slammed the brakes. The tires slid. The windshield exploded inward as the antlers burst through, missing my shoulder by inches. The truck veered into the ditch. The airbag didn't deploy. My head slammed forward, and everything went black. I woke up to her whispering my name. We were in bed, our bed. Morning light filtered through white sheets draped over us like a tent. She was calm, peaceful, nothing like when I left. She kissed me softly, her skin warm, her hair brushing my face. I didn't move. I was terrified of breaking the moment. Then she screamed. The warmth vanished. The light disappeared. I was ripped back into the cold, gasping for air. Ice clung to my beard. I was lying in the snow, several feet from the truck. I didn't know how I'd gotten there. The deer was still alive, pinned in the windshield, screaming in panic. I grabbed my knife and ended it quickly. Mercy felt necessary. The truck was useless. No phone, no signal. I searched the snow where I'd been lying. Nothing. I didn't understand how I'd moved. I started walking. A half-mile in a winter storm changes a man. The cold burns, then numbs. The woods pressed in on both sides, tall and silent. A branch snapped. Then another. I heard singing. It sounded human. I ran. When I reached the house, every light was on. That should have warned me. I pounded on the front door. The lock was jammed. I ran to the back and fell inside, gasping. "Mandy!" Dead leaves and dirt were scattered across the floor. Scratches marred the door. Blood streaked the wood. Something was embedded there, her fingernail. My heart stopped. Books were everywhere, furniture overturned. I kept repeating the words I'd said my whole life. I am not my father. Then there was knocking. Tap, tap. My phone lay in the snow outside the door. It rang. Her voice came through the speaker, calm and broken. "You left me." The lights flickered. "It wants you, too." The phone died. I saw the tree by the driveway. I didn't remember it being there. Its branches were too long, too still. She screamed again. I ran outside. The ground beneath the light was bare and torn. The tree was gone. Then it screamed from the woods. I ran back inside as something heavy chased me. A man sang outside my door. Now I understand the voice, my father's voice, singing the same song over and over. Do you hear what I hear? The tree returned. Its roots crawled over the snow. Its bark shifted. It wore my wife's face. I burned the house. I smiled as the flames rose. But fire didn't save me. I woke in darkness, trapped. Roots wrapped around me. Bark pressed into my skin. I was inside it. My legs were gone. My father sang above me. I found her hair tangled in the wood. Lavender filled my lungs. I understand now. It's not a tree. It never was. I rented the cabin because I was exhausted, in a way sleep never seemed to fix. Work had been grinding me down for months, the kind of tired that sinks into your bones and makes every morning feel heavier than the last. I didn't want anything fancy. I didn't want a resort or a retreat with guided meditation and overpriced coffee. I wanted quiet. I wanted trees. I wanted something cheap enough that I wouldn't feel guilty about taking the time. The listing said it was secluded, quiet, perfect for writers, hikers, or anyone looking to unplug. The photos showed a small wooden cabin tucked into a forested valley, hills rising on all sides like a protective bowl, pine trees everywhere, no neighboring buildings in sight, just a dirt road, a porch, and endless green. It was booked solid for weeks. So I grabbed the first opening without thinking too hard about it. The cabin sits low in the valley, surrounded by hills thick with pine and undergrowth. During the day it feels almost comforting. The air smells clean and sharp. The wind moves through the trees in a steady rhythm. Birds flit between branches, and insects hum lazily in the afternoon heat. The place looks old, but not neglected. The stove works. The sink runs. The floorboards creak when you walk, but not in a way that feels threatening. Just old wood settling. The owner left a TV with an old PS4 hooked up, a handful of games stacked on a shelf beside it. There's a guest book on the table with handwritten notes and smiley faces, people talking about hiking trails, fishing spots, how peaceful it all was. A couple of entries mentioned great sleep and quiet nights. Then I wish I had paid more attention to what wasn't written. The first night, I was half asleep when I heard it. At first I thought I was dreaming. My brain tried to label the sound before I was fully awake. Wind, thunder, maybe a distant engine echoing through the hills. Then it happened again. It was a roar. My first real thought was a bear. I'd grown up around bears. I knew the sounds they made, the way they huffed and growled and sometimes screamed when startled. This wasn't that. This sound had weight. It had shape. It tore through the air like something physical, something that pressed against the cabin and made the walls feel thinner than they should have been. The roar rose, dipped, then ended in a deep, rolling vibration that seemed to travel through the ground itself. I could hear the trees respond to it, our leaves shivering, as if a massive pressure wave had passed through them. I sat up in bed, heart pounding, holding my breath. After a long minute of silence, I got up and went to the window. Between the pines on the far hill, something moved. At first I thought it was two trees standing taller than the rest, their tops swaying slightly. Then one of them shifted in a way trees don't. That's when I saw the horns. They were too tall. That's the only way I can describe them. Not antlers branching outward, not goat horns curling back. These rose straight up in long, smooth arcs, black against the stars. They looked wrong against the sky, like lines drawn where nothing should be. Below them I could just make out a shape. A head, maybe. Deer-like, but distorted by distance and darkness. It stood still for a moment, then shifted again, slow and deliberate. I closed the curtain and backed away from the window. I didn't sleep much after that. When morning came, the world looked normal again. Sunlight poured into the valley. Birds sang. The cabin looked harmless, embarrassingly harmless. I told myself it had been a dream, or exhaustion, or my imagination feeding on isolation. I spent the day hiking nearby trails, sticking closer to the cabin than I'd planned. I fished in a shallow stream. I read by the fireplace. I played games until midnight, trying to convince myself that everything was fine. That night, the roars came back. There was no mistaking them this time. They weren't constant. They came in intervals, spaced just far enough apart that my body never relaxed. Each time one ended, I found myself holding my breath, waiting, recounting seconds until the next one tore through the silence. My muscles stayed tight. My jaw ached from clenching. I turned off all the lights. I didn't look outside for a long time. I sat on the bed, staring at the dark, listening. When the roars finally stopped, the silence felt wrong, heavy, pressurized. I forced myself to look out the window again. The thing was closer this time. I could see it moving along the tree line on the near hill, its massive shape weaving between the pines. It didn't walk like an animal. It moved with an unsettling smoothness, stopping and starting as if it were listening. Then it turned its head toward the cabin. I don't know how I knew it was looking at me. The distance was too great, the darkness too deep, but something in my chest tightened, a cold certainty settling in. And I closed the curtains immediately and pressed my back against the wall, sliding down until I was sitting on the floor. I buried my face in my knees and tried to slow my breathing. I told myself I was panicking. That fear was making connections that weren't there. The next day, I decided to leave. I packed my car before sunset, moving fast, throwing things into the back without organizing them. Fishing gear, hiking boots, clothes, everything went in wherever it fit. I'd planned to stay the whole week, so there was more than I expected. I kept glancing at the tree line as I worked, flinching at every sound. I told myself I'd leave at first light. I didn't want to drive those winding roads at night, especially with fog already starting to creep in. My hands were shaking, and I'd had a few drinks to steady my nerves, which in hindsight was stupid. I thought distance mattered. I thought whatever it was stayed in the hills, stayed in its territory. That was my mistake. The roars started earlier that night, not from the hills, from the tree line just beyond the clearing. I froze when I heard the first one. It was closer than before, so close that the sound didn't just travel through the air. It pressed against the cabin, made the windows rattle slightly in their frames. I didn't go outside. I didn't look out the windows. I shut the curtains tight, turned off every light, and sat on the edge of the bed with my keys clenched in my hand like they could save me. The sound moved. Heavy footsteps followed, each one making the ground tremble. Leaves crunched under enormous weight. Something scraped against the side of the cabin, the sharp claws dragging across wood with a slow, deliberate sound. The roar came again, louder than anything I had ever heard. It felt like my ears were going to burst. My chest vibrated with it. My vision blurred at the edges. The sense of dread was overwhelming, a primal certainty that something was very wrong. Through the curtains, shadows moved. Long, distorted silhouettes stretched across the walls, shifting as something passed by the windows. I couldn't stop myself from peeking through a small gap. I saw its abdomen first, massive and partially hidden in shadow. The windows were more than 6 feet off the ground. The thing outside loomed over them easily. It was tall, much taller than it should have been. That was when it fully sank in that it wasn't leaving. It knew I was here. I don't know how, but it did. And whatever it was, I don't think it came out of curiosity. The roars stopped. In their place came a low, vibrating sound, a deep growl that resonated through the floorboards. It wasn't aggressive. It sounded patient. I slid off the bed and crawled underneath, my movements slow and quiet. My heart was hammering so hard, I was sure it could hear it. I pulled my phone close to my chest and tried not to sob out loud. The porch creaked. Something heavy leaned against the front of the cabin. The wood groaned under the pressure, a tired, strained sound like it might give way. Footsteps crossed the porch slowly, deliberately, stopping just outside the bedroom. Then the front door exploded inward. The sound was deafening. Wood splintered, metal clanged. The entire cabin shook. I bit down on my hand to keep from screaming, tears streaming down my face as I shook beneath the bed. Heavy footsteps moved inside, slow, confident. If anyone ever reads this, listen to me. If you see horns rising over the tree line, don't wait. Don't assume distance will protect you. It won't stay there. It's already seen you. It doesn't need to rush. Oh God, I can see its feet from under the bed, just for a moment. If this is your first time here, I invite you to subscribe to LURK, the Insomnia Files. This channel is dedicated to real accounts, disturbing encounters, and unexplained moments shared by people who never expected anything to go wrong until it did. New files are released regularly, usually when most people are asleep. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next case when the night feels a little too quiet. Now, back to the story. The attic had been leaking for a few days. and by that point it had pushed me past my limit. Every morning there was a fresh stain spreading across the ceiling, darker than the last, sagging slightly like it was breathing. Elizabeth told me more than once that I should just call a contractor. She meant well, but I could not stand the idea. We had been warned when we bought the place that it was a fixer-upper, and with a baby on the way and our savings already stretched thin, I told her I could handle it. I needed to handle it. This house was supposed to be our fresh start, our quiet place, away from the city. I promised her I could turn it into something safe, something solid. We had lived there almost 2 years without major trouble. I had rewired half the house myself, fixed pipes that rattled and knocked at night, patched walls and sealed drafts. So when the attic started leaking, I assumed it was nothing more than another problem that needed attention. Probably a loose pipe, or some animal that had crawled in during the last storm. Annoying, but manageable. I dragged the ladder out and climbed the narrow stairs into the attic, toolbox banging against my leg with every step. The stairs creaked under my weight, and the air grew thick as I pushed the hatch open. The attic never made sense to me. The house was small, barely more than a 2-bedroom with a single bath. It was not tall enough to justify the space above it. The attic was low, barely tall enough to crouch in, yet it stretched farther than it should have. I had never questioned it before. I was just glad for the storage. I switched on my flashlight and swept the beam across the space. From boxes of holiday decorations, old clothes, baby toys we had been given for Jameson, tucked away for when he was older. I smiled briefly at that. Grandparents always went overboard. Then something shifted. It was subtle. A slight movement behind an old wooden rocking horse we had picked up at a yard sale. I froze, then slowly moved closer, pushing boxes aside. I reached out before I saw it. The texture hit me first. Wet, soft, wrinkled. My fingers sank slightly into it, and the smell followed immediately. Rot, sweet and thick and unmistakable. I jerked my hand back and swung the flashlight down. The body was collapsed in on itself. The skull had caved where my hand had pressed, and one eye had burst completely, leaking into the floorboards. The neck bore a faint indentation where my pinky had been. I could not tell what it was at first. It was too decayed. No fur, no clear markings. 4 limbs, but the paws were wrong. Too long. The fingers were thin and jointed, almost like hands. The tail bent at an unnatural angle, like an elbow, ending in something sharp that might have been bone or claw. I told myself it was a raccoon. It had to be. Anything else was not an option. I scrambled backward out of the attic and barely made it to the bathroom before I vomited. Greasy residue coated my left hand, and I scrubbed at it until my skin burned. I changed my shirt, grabbed gloves, plastic bags, disinfectant. I went back up and did what needed to be done. It took multiple trips. The smell clung to everything. When I was done, the attic was empty except for a dark stain where the body had been. My hand itched fiercely, red bumps already forming. That Elizabeth noticed and told me to see a doctor. I told her I would wait. I did not mention the hands or the tail. I searched for an entry point, a hole, a crack, something. There was nothing. The leak came from the exact spot where the creature had been, but the attic offered no explanation. It was almost as if the body itself had been sealing something. That thought stayed with me longer than it should have. That night I barely slept. I dreamed of something outside the bedroom window, calling a name over and over. I woke with the sound stuck in my head, repeating silently on my tongue. I muttered it all day without realizing. Elizabeth noticed. I caught myself staring out the window, whispering without knowing why. 2 nights later, I woke thirsty and unsettled. I went into the kitchen and turned on the light. I'd nearly jumping out of my skin. Something was dripping down the window. At first I thought it was a reflection. Then lightning flashed, and I saw it clearly. A thick translucent ooze seeped from a hairline crack in the ceiling, sliding down the glass. It looked alive in the light. I grabbed my cup and scooped some up before it reached the sink. Then I scrambled for towels and a bucket, heart racing. Exhaustion took over. I picked up my cup and brought it to bed, not realizing what I had done until the liquid touched my tongue. It was warm, bitter. It slid down my throat before I could stop it. I gagged and spat, but it was already inside me. The next day my throat hurt. Elizabeth said I had been muttering in my sleep. She said I had opened windows at night and stood there, whispering the same name over and over. I snapped at her when she suggested calling someone. I told her she did not understand, that I was the only one who could fix this. She left 2 days ago, took Jameson with her, said I was scaring her. I found the leak last night. The attic feels smaller now. My skin burns. My throat is swollen shut. I cannot speak. I sit alone, listening as something moves beneath my skin. The ooze was never water. It was never a leak. It was an invitation. He is inside me now, crawling, reaching, peeling me open from within. I understand, at last. He has arrived. Nothing annoys me more than having my hands full and needing to dig around for my key fob. It happens almost every morning. I stop for coffee for my boyfriend and me, balance the cardboard tray against my chest, and then fumble through my pockets like I've never unlocked a door before in my life. It's a small thing, but it always puts me in a bad mood. That's why I said yes to him. He was standing just outside the entrance to our apartment building, struggling with 2 paper grocery bags. He looked younger than me at first glance, maybe late 30s or early 40s, but there was something worn about him. His posture sagged, his shoulders narrow, gray streaked through his hair in uneven patches, like someone had smudged pencil marks across it and never bothered to erase them properly. "Excuse me," he said, shifting the bags in his arms. "Would you mind?" He gestured awkwardly toward the door. "I'm on the 3rd floor and—" "Yeah, sure," I said immediately. "No problem at all. I was literally complaining about this the other day." I tapped my key fob against the reader. The lock clicked, and the glass doors slid open. We stepped inside together, out of the cold. Our building has both an elevator and a stairwell. The elevator is old but reliable, the kind that just works once you're inside. You don't need a key fob to use it. That's why I assumed he'd head that way, especially with his arms full. Instead, he turned sharply toward the staircase and started up without another word. "Wouldn't it be easier to take the elevator?" I asked, half joking. He stopped and looked back at me. His eyes were a pale, unsettling blue, not warm, not curious, just cold. They'd like ice, left too long in a freezer. "I'm not stupid, mate," he said flatly. "If I wanted to take the elevator, I would have taken it." The tone caught me off guard. I felt my face heat up. "Okay," I said, throwing up my hands. "Jesus, I was just offering." He turned away and continued up the stairs without another glance. The elevator dinged as it arrived behind me, doors opening. For a second, I considered stepping inside and forgetting the whole thing. But the more I thought about it, the more irritated I became. I paid too much rent to be spoken to like that. I already dealt with enough casual homophobia from people in the building who thought 2 men holding hands in the lobby was somehow offensive. I didn't need another asshole neighbor added to the list. I decided to take the stairs, too. The stairwell was a narrow concrete switchback with motion-activated lights that flicked on as you walked. I climbed slowly, listening for his footsteps above me. At each landing, I leaned forward and peeked around the corner, half expecting him to be standing there, waiting. He wasn't. He'd said he lived on the 3rd floor. When I reached it, the hallway lights were off, the corridor dark and empty. No sound, no movement. That felt strange, but I kept going up to the 4th floor, where Greg and I lived. The lights there were on. As I stepped into the hallway, I saw him again. He was standing outside door 409, just 1 unit down from ours. He pulled a key from his pocket, unlocked the door, and slipped inside without looking around. The 2 grocery bags he'd been carrying were left on the floor outside his door. I stopped walking. Normally I would have ignored it. I already had his apartment number. I could file a complaint if I wanted to and be done with it. But now that I knew he lived right next to us, I didn't want to start a feud that would turn into months of uncomfortable hallway encounters. I also couldn't shake the feeling that leaving groceries on the floor like that was off. I walked over and knocked on the door. My plan was simple. Apologize for earlier, even if I didn't think I really owed him one, and use the bags as an excuse. I'd hand them over. He'd mutter something vaguely polite, and we'd both go back to pretending the other didn't exist. No one answered. I knocked again, louder this time. "Hey, your groceries." Still nothing. I stood there for a moment, listening. I just watched him walk inside. I knew he could hear me. I looked down at the bags. If there was food in there, I didn't want it spoiling. Maybe he'd gone to the bathroom. Maybe he'd fallen asleep. Maybe he was just ignoring me. I crouched and peeked inside the first bag. It wasn't food. Inside were 4 toothbrushes in a sealed carton, a bulk pack of deodorant sticks, several thick rolls of duct tape, and a large spool of black bin liners, the kind used in industrial settings, not kitchens. I frowned. I checked the second bag. It was empty. That made no sense. Both bags had been full when he was carrying them. Wham! A knot formed in my stomach, but I pushed the feeling aside. People buy weird stuff all the time. Maybe he worked in maintenance. Maybe he ran a cleaning business. Maybe he'd left the other items inside already. Still, I didn't feel comfortable leaving the bags in the hallway. I picked them up and carried them into my apartment, deciding I'd sort it out in the morning. Greg was in the kitchen when I came in, already unpacking our groceries. "Hey," he said, smiling. "You're back late." "Ran into a real charmer downstairs," I said, setting the coffee tray down. "New neighbor, I think. Total attitude." Greg raised an eyebrow. "What happened?" I told him about the man, the stairs, the comment, the bags. He laughed when I got to the part about the beard. "How many times do I have to tell you?" he said. "You scare people with that thing." "Good," I said, cracking open a can of Cass and crushing it in my hand once it was empty. "I'm terrifying." We laughed, the tension easing. Then Greg frowned slightly. "What happened to Elliot?" I blinked. "Who?" "Our neighbor," he said, "across the hall." "Oh," I said slowly. "Oh, maybe he moved out." Greg shook his head. "I saw him earlier this week. I'm pretty sure he lived alone." I leaned back against the counter, thinking. We're the last people who should be judging living arrangements. Maybe he got a roommate, or maybe we've got a new couple to invite to brunch. Greg made a face. "You're right. I don't know why I'm playing detective." He glanced toward the bedroom. Bed? Definitely bed. That night I slept poorly. I kept dreaming about stairwells that never ended, and doors that wouldn't open no matter how hard I pushed. At some point, I felt Greg shaking me awake. "What?" I mumbled, "What's wrong?" He looked pale, eyes wide. "Check your phone." "Did you get the alert too?" I squinted at the screen as I unlocked it. An emergency alert filled the display. Missing person, white male, Caucasian, 5 feet 9 inches. White last seen 1 week ago. Please contact authorities with any relevant information. There was a photo attached. My stomach dropped. It was Elliot, the man Greg had mentioned, our neighbor, the one who supposedly lived across the hall. When we rushed into the hallway, my heart pounding. The grocery bags were gone. The door to 409 was wide open. A sharp, chemical smell drifted out into the hall. Bleach, strong enough to sting the back of my throat. I stood frozen, staring at the open doorway, the dark apartment beyond it, and realized all at once why there had been 2 full bags before, and why only one had been empty when I looked. Whatever had been in the second bag, it had never been meant to leave that apartment. If you're still here, it means these stories didn't just pass through you. They stayed. Every file you heard tonight was shared by real people. Real fear, real uncertainty, real moments where something felt wrong, or almost did. And the most disturbing part, most of these stories don't end with answers. They end with silence, with questions, with the feeling that whatever was there might still be. If you want to keep exploring the cases that don't let go, subscribe to LURK, the Insomnia Files. There are many more files waiting, and not all of them close before it's too late. The old woman thrashed in the snow, her body jerking and flailing in uneven bursts, and I stood there watching her. The way she moved reminded me of a fish on the deck of my grandfather's boat, gasping and twisting while the world loomed too large and too bright above it. She didn't scream. She couldn't. The parts of her brain responsible for speech had decayed long before I ever met her. Long before I took this job. At the time I felt nothing resembling panic or urgency. What I felt was fascination, a calm, unsettling curiosity. A human being stripped of everything except the most basic reflexes, reduced to something raw and mechanical, something honest. There was a strange beauty in the way her body fought, without understanding why. It felt almost sacred to witness it. "Meredith," the voice snapped me out of it. It came from the hallway, sharp and commanding. My attention broke, the moment fractured, and fear rushed in to replace the quiet awe. Fear of being seen, fear of being interrupted, fear of consequences I hadn't yet fully imagined. I had been working at this nursing home for less than a week. It was my first job after graduation. I was new, young, and painfully aware of how easily mistakes could define a career before it even began. Judith got out. "I'm sorry." She got out. I heard my own voice, thin and frantic, but it sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. The fear wasn't for Judith. It was for myself. Fear that someone would take this moment away from me. Fear that whatever truth I had been brushing up against would vanish the second someone else stepped in. Fear of administration, of paperwork, of reports, of whispers. The fear of the way nurses talk about each other behind closed doors. Fear because I knew, even then, that nurses eat their young. "Call a code. Get out of the way." Linda's voice cut through everything. She shoved past me, hard enough that I stumbled sideways. She moved fast, purposeful, her body already dropping to its knees beside Judith in the snow. Powder sprayed as her knees hit, staining her scrubs. Linda was efficient, decisive, exactly what a charge nurse was supposed to be. She looked nothing like me in that moment. She looked like authority. "Call 911. Carl had seen her rush past. He abandoned his push broom where it leaned against the wall and waddled over to me, his gait slow and heavy in the way of men whose youth had been spent lifting and carrying and breaking their bodies for a paycheck. "What happened?" he asked. She got out. The words wouldn't line up properly. My mind was still half in that other place, the one where Judith's movements had felt important instead of tragic. Being dragged back into reality felt violent. I couldn't bridge the gap fast enough. Carl didn't wait for clarity. He ran for the emergency phone. "Meredith, did you call a code?" No. The training had been there. The procedures, the laminated sheets, the lectures. I had absorbed none of it in a way that mattered. In theory, I knew what to do. In practice, my mind was blank. It was a failure that felt unforgivable, even as it happened. "Get out here. Stay with her. Let her seize. Keep her airway clear. I'll be right back." Linda's words pushed me into motion. I knelt beside Judith, my knees sinking into the snow where her body had torn it up. But she was no longer flailing. Her arms drew inward, folding against her chest, palms turned toward her shoulders. Decerebrate posturing. I recognized it instantly from textbooks. I also knew what it meant. Her name was Judith. I remembered that. Her son had visited earlier that day. A rough man, unpolished, the kind people quietly judged. He came every week, they said, checking on what he had paid for. He brought flowers that smelled artificial, like grocery store bread and dye. He hugged her when he left. She stared straight through him. She didn't know him anymore. She hadn't known me either when I drew her blood, her eyes vacant, her body compliant. What had she done to end up here? Or what had been done to her? Was this a punishment, or simply entropy finishing its work? Her lips were blue. Foam gathered at the corners of her mouth, but her eyes fluttered, the yellowed whites showing beneath half-lowered lids. "What do you see?" I whispered to her. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Maybe she saw nothing. Maybe she saw everything. "Get out of the way, Meredith." Linda was back, with Lisa and Tony behind her. I moved without resistance this time, retreating to a nearby bench, dusted with snow. I sat, my legs numb, my hands useless in my lap. The paramedics arrived quickly. Their movements were practiced, rhythmic. Chest compressions matched the pounding of my own heart. The IED hummed, then snapped. Electricity surged through Judith's body. I felt it in my chest, in my bones. A rush of emotion flooded me, overwhelming and inexplicable. It felt like revelation, like something holy brushing past me. I cried, not from grief, but from awe. I told myself she was meeting God, that something vast and important was happening right in front of me. They loaded her onto a stretcher. Wheels skidded over icy stone. Snow clung to the gurney as they pushed her back into the building. The courtyard swallowed the quiet afterward. God went with her. I stayed behind. Someone sat beside me on the bench. "What the hell are you doing?" "Linda." Her voice was low, controlled. The security light caught her face. Smooth skin, pale, too smooth. For someone who claimed to be in her late 30s, she looked untouched by time. No lines, no blemishes, no tiredness. She smelled faintly of bleach and something rotten beneath it. "I'm sorry," I said. "How long were you standing there?" Her eyes drilled into me. "You're new, but that's not an excuse. Go back to your rounds. We'll talk before the shift ends." She left without waiting for a response. Carl was shoveling blood-stained snow into a biohazard bag. "I'm sorry," I told him quietly. "First time's rough," he said. "Never let it get easy. You ain't a monster." I thanked him and went back inside. That's when I saw the blinking red light, the security camera, mounted high, watching the courtyard door, watching me, watching everything. Fear unlike anything I had known wrapped itself around my chest. Real fear, consequence fear, investigation fear. I imagined my license evaporating, hearings, reports, my future collapsing because of 5 minutes of fascination. I locked myself in the women's restroom. There was no mirror, just a sink and a stall. I scrubbed my face with wet paper towels, over and over, as if water could erase what I'd seen, what I'd felt. No, water cleanses. Water is holy. Clear the mechanism. Linda's office was behind the nursing station. I knew where the security system was kept. VHS tapes, analog, old, vulnerable. The hallway was noisy with confusion. Residents agitated by the disruption. Linda was busy. There was time. Her office door opened easily. The room was dark, except for the glow of monitors. 5 screens, 5 VCRs. One showed the courtyard. I rewound the tape. I watched myself on screen, standing frozen, watching. Something else caught my eye. A framed photo on Linda's desk. A man in black, pale, wearing a cape. A red heart drawn around the word phantom. I noticed a cooler under her desk. Inside were bags of blood. The tape continued. I watched an empty set of black scrubs walk into frame. No body, just clothing, moving. My stomach dropped. "Why are you in my office?" Linda stood in the doorway. She hadn't walked. She had simply arrived. I lied badly. She smiled gently. "You're a bad nurse," she said softly. "Why are you in my cooler?" Her fingers touched my face. Too long, too sharp. On the screen, the empty scrubs ran. "When did you figure it out?" she asked. I hadn't. Not really. She leaned close. Her teeth were wrong, jagged, wet. Nurses eat their young. "Clear the mechanism." I headbutted her. My father taught me never to wait. The fight was violent and clumsy. Pain exploded everywhere. Ribs broke. My hand shattered against a wall stud. Blood sprayed. Black ooze poured from her nose. I grabbed the TV and brought it down on her head. Heat. Smoke. Darkness. I woke up in a hospital bed. My parents were there. My father cried. I cried too. Because that was the day I saw God. I am a staging specialist. I work for a large housing company, which I will call V. We deal with the kind of houses people lose their lives over. The $4 million foreclosures that ruined families long after the financial crash was supposed to be over. These are homes the banks took back, cleaned out, and now want to sell like nothing ever happened inside them. My job is to make those houses feel alive again. I make them look like a happy family just stepped out for a walk. I've been doing this long enough to know exactly how people think when they walk into an empty place. I know how to trick the brain. I know what smells, textures, and lighting make people feel safe. I'm good at what I do. The problem is that I spend most of my life on the road. I sleep in my van more than I sleep in my own bed. I follow the same routine in every house, every single time. That's why what happened in Vermont still doesn't make sense to me. The first thing I do in any empty house is what I privately call the bread ritual. The moment I unlock the door, before I even look around, I carry in my portable convection oven and set it up in the kitchen. Then I bake rosemary bread. I don't eat bread. I haven't touched carbs in years. I've been on a strict keto diet since I started working for V. But the smell works every time. It hits something deep in people's brains. Comfort, safety, childhood. Even I feel it sometimes, even though I know it's fake. V says the smell makes a house feel like a home. I think it smells like a sales lie. Either way, by the time buyers or appraisers walk in, The place feels warm. That even if the previous owners lost everything inside those walls. I travel with what we call Kit 48. That's the modern rustic package. Sofas, coffee tables, lamps, shelves. All of it made from compressed particle board. If you don't look too closely, it looks like real wood. If you do look closely, you can see the glue holding sawdust together. It's cheap, but it photographs well, and that's all V cares about. I also carry a set of standard family photos. Perfect smiles, clean clothes, polished faces. They barely look human. I place them carefully on shelves and side tables, so the rooms feel lived in, like someone belongs there. Last Tuesday, I was staging a colonial house in New Hampshire. I was exhausted. Driving non-stop will do that to you. When I reached for a bottle of dark walnut stain to touch up a scratch on a coffee table, I knocked it over. The bottle hit the edge and shattered. It shouldn't have broken that easily, but it did. The stain spilled across the table and soaked in instantly. I tried wiping it, but the table absorbed it like it was starving. What remained was a dark, jagged shape right in the center. It looked like a warped butterfly, split down the middle. Perfectly visible from every angle. It was exactly where the camera would catch it during listing photos. That meant I would need to go back to the warehouse to replace it. More driving, more time on the road. I didn't have the energy for that, so I shoved the table into my van. The van uses a thumb scanner to open the back, and it's been glitchy lately. It took a few tries, but it finally opened. I dragged the table inside and told myself I'd replace it later. 3 days later, I arrived at a ranch-style house in Vermont. I walked into the living room to start measuring, and I froze. There was already a coffee table sitting in the center of the room. No one else had access to the house. I walked over and touched the wood. The stain was there. The same stain, same shape, same dark butterfly blot. The walnut stain was still sticky. It came off on my finger. Underneath, the inventory sticker was peeled in the exact same spot, where my nail had caught it days earlier. I stood there trying to understand what I was seeing. My first thought was that I had brought it in without realizing. I know that sounds stupid, but it happens. I go on autopilot sometimes. I've washed dishes twice because I forgot I already washed them. My memory isn't great. So I went back to my van. The scanner fought me again. After a few tries, the door opened. The table was still inside, stain and all. I just stood there holding the door, waiting for my brain to catch up. 2 identical tables, 2 identical stains. That shouldn't be possible. My head was pounding. I checked my phone to see when I could take more painkillers. I had lost 30 minutes. I was still standing there, holding the van door. I closed it and went back inside. I checked every room carefully. Living room, kitchen, hallways. No other duplicated furniture. Until I reached the master bedroom. Something was sticking out of the wall, about 6 inches above the floor. The tip of a man's shoe protruded straight out. It was a black leather brogue, expensive, polished, the kind worn with a tailored suit. The wall met the leather perfectly, like it had grown around it. No cracks, no seams. But I thought it was some kind of unfinished construction detail. Maybe an art installation someone forgot about. I touched the edge where the paint met the leather. The wall pressed inward slightly. It felt like skin. I pulled out my phone to take a picture, and that's when I noticed how dark the room had become. I checked the time. 2 hours were gone. I had lost 2 hours. I took a photo and called my supervisor. I explained everything. He said I was tired and imagining things. That made me angry. When I insisted I wasn't, he brushed me off. Said builders leave junk behind all the time. Told me to cover it with a dresser and finish staging. I've been doing this for years. I know the difference between fatigue and something being wrong. I stayed in a motel that night. I didn't sleep. I kept staring at the photo, trying to find a rational explanation. There wasn't one. In the morning, I had a voicemail from a coworker named Mady. She works out of the Chicago hub. She sounded terrified, crying, asking if I remembered the broken swings near our primary school in Essex. Mady has never been to England. She's never left the Midwest. She kept saying my name until the message cut off. I tried calling her back, straight to voicemail. I texted her. No reply. I hadn't thought about that park in years. My headache got worse. When I went back to the Vermont house, the shoe was gone. The wall was perfect. No marks, no texture difference. Nothing. I ran my hand over it again and again. It was flawless. I'm looking at the photo on my phone. I'm looking at the coffee table. I've lost hours of time. I'm inventorying my entire kit tonight. And I am absolutely certain something is very wrong. If you're reading this and any part of it makes sense to you, I need to know.